I'm sensing a little bias here. The United States looks like it's the most effective. Okay, I know some more people could put some thoughts down there. That'd be fantastic if you do. I'll go back and see who has and who hasn't. Okay. All right. So as I look at here, I think it is natural. So why don't we finish your thoughts here. I'll stop. I'll have a little discipline here. Okay. So it does look like the United States, when you compare it to Canada and Mexico, you can make a good claim that the United States was effective. I shouldn't say very, but was most effective compared to Canada and Mexico in dealing with the Great Depression. And it could be, what goes into that, looking at the idea that it had the New Deal, it provided for relief recovery, passed bills to help the public and the working class. The federal government stepped up. I mean, all those things, what it looks like is it shows that the government went from not being responsive, but to being responsive to the needs and the will of the American public. And it seemed like FDR was able to tap into that and begin to create some programs. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. But the idea that trying something, all right, and we have many of these programs, some of the big ones, the SEC, the FDIC, Social Security, they're still with us today, and they have been tweaked. And we've had some pretty robust times in which you would think we would pull back from some of these programs, and other times where we've struggled and we've expanded them. In the 1960s, like Social Security, it gets expanded, and then you have Medicare and Medicaid being added to it, all those things. you could make a claim that Mexico would be the next one that does an effective job. You know, they looked at consolidating the revolution, and they used some of their reform policies to nationalize their economy and focus more on internal growth. And so that seemed to help at first, but then kind of flattened out as we progressed through the 30s. Canada, looking at the prime ministers, King and Bennett, in many ways, they were very reluctant to really dig in like the Mexican government and the United States government in digging in and helping out with the Great Depression here. So when you look at this type of activity I had you do just right now, this is something that could possibly appear on the IB history exam if they happen next year. They're not happening this year, but where as a former paper 3 reader, and this is a paper 3 topic, it actually had compare the United States and Canadian approach to the Great Depression and judge its effectiveness. And so this would be perfect for that. All right, so thank you for doing this activity with this Padlet. I appreciate that. All right. Anyone have any thoughts? Okay. All right. Now, going back here. Let's see here. Let's do a quick shift. I'm so impressed. My technology.
Shirley Chisholm.
All right. Got a little excited there. One thing now, looking at the Great Depression, because right now we've really been looking at government and their approach and government policies and the effectiveness of these policies. But really, how effective do we really know them to be, and how did they really impact societies? We got to take a look at groups. We got to take a look at individual groups and see, did the New Deal, and now we're just going to focus on the United States, did the New Deal really create some change for Americans? We can say it did, but then did it do it equally? All right, so this is where we have to go back and think of that critics activity that you did. And did the New Deal go too far or not far enough? Those who might be conservatives, fairly wealthy Americans and all that stuff, they're going to say, Roosevelt, you went way too far. Come on, man, you're hurting my pocketbook. All right, you're going to bankrupt all that stuff because you're just spending left and right. Others are going to say you didn't go far enough. And this could be where women and various minority groups could say, it didn't go far enough. Because, African Americans would say, well, I'm a farmer, but this farm program didn't impact me. I couldn't take advantage of it because I'm Black. Or the New Deal program is not going to go far enough for women because they weren't part of it, whatever it might be. Or you could be part of a group and you get signaled out and you might even get sent out of the country. So therefore, then the New Deal programs may not even touch you at all that way. So on the screen, I have a video clip here, and it's called Ballad of Roosevelt. It's by Langston Hughes. Have we heard of Langston Hughes before? You might have read some of his works, maybe. He is part of a group of writers associated with the Harlem Renaissance. All right, so again, perfect for this month here. I too am an American. Sometimes that poem stands out. But here he writes about, he creates a poem, and it is about the New Deal program. And from the perspective of an African American. All right, so I want want us to listen to this and see, really, what is the big takeaway from this particular poem. All right. We could read it in class. I found a little video clip that we'll watch it. Right here.
In 1929, 10 years after the end of World War I, came the most severe economic collapse in the history of the nation. People stood on bread lines, struggling to survive. 1/3 of the labor force was out of work. Black people were especially hard hit, and they found that their needs were ignored by the government. Langston Hughes, an African-American poet of the Harlem Renaissance, voiced their frustration.
The pot was empty. The cupboard was bare. I said, Papa, what's the matter here? Waiting on Roosevelt, son. Roosevelt? Roosevelt. Waiting on Roosevelt, son. The rent was due and the lights were out. I said, tell me, Mama, what's it all about? We're waiting on Roosevelt, son. Roosevelt, Roosevelt, just waiting on Roosevelt. Sister got sick and doctor wouldn't come because we wouldn't pay him the proper sum. Waiting on Roosevelt, Roosevelt, Roosevelt. That's a waiting on Roosevelt. Then one day they put us out the house. Ma and Pa was meek as a mouse, still waiting on Roosevelt, Roosevelt, Roosevelt. But when they felt those cold wind blows and didn't have a place to go, I said, I'm tired of waiting on Roosevelt, Roosevelt, Roosevelt. Damn tired of waiting on Roosevelt. I can't get a job and I can't get no grub. My backbone and navel doing the belly rub. Waiting on Roosevelt, Roosevelt, Roosevelt. And a lot of other folks was hungry and cold, done stopped believing what they'd been told by Roosevelt, Roosevelt, Roosevelt. Because the pot's still empty and the cupboard's still bare. And you can't build a bungalow out of air. Mr. Roosevelt, listen. What's the matter here?
So looking at that, ultimately, what is Langston Hughes trying to say?
Like they didn't get any help from like they went to they couldn't afford the doctor, and they were waiting for any company, and then they got kicked out of their house and stuff.
Yep. So the Roosevelt programs, the New Deal isn't reaching them. All right. And so foreclosures, evictions, people not being able to pay their bills was real. And but it wasn't, not everyone would be affected the same way. So if you were a person of color, women, the New Deal program is going to fall short. Now, in regards to African Americans, remember we had that group known as the Black Cabinet. I had mentioned that at the beginning of this unit, the Black Cabinet. The Black Cabinet did try to work hard with the Roosevelt administration, is going to have some success. But here is an example where they're not going to be able to be influential in all the matters here. So, and when this poem comes out, we're talking about mid-30s here. There's frustration. There's frustration. Still, though, in 1936, a good number of African Americans are going to vote for Roosevelt. I mean, it's a huge landslide for the guy. So the possibility is there. I think, some of the big takeaways. All right. Now, what I want us to do here is, and I opened it up today, is the activity impact of the Great Depression. So let's go to Schoology. If you haven't already, let's open it up and it will look like this. All right, and I'm just so glad that I can move from my tabs to tabs here on the Google Meet, because that hasn't always been the case here. And so without my projector, I'm still able to do what I need to do. All right, so it looks like this, and this is a summative assessment. So this is a big one. Everything we've been doing up to now has been formative. So this is definitely a game changer when it's going to come to our grade. And so in this activity, we want to look at the impacts of the Great Depression in the United States, specifically looking at minority groups here: women, African Americans, Latinx, Indigenous people, Asian Americans, and artists. All right, which you might think that's kind of like the odd one out of there. But artists transcends multiple groups here. So we put that piece in there as well. And so what you need to do, you can either work by yourself or you can work with a historical buddy. All right, and so that historical buddy be in this class, or someone on a different day, or VLA, but it has to be in this my section. So you can't work with Miss Iden's sections. You got to be with my section. Okay, so I got to throw that little clarification piece out there. Your project must include three of these three groups, but one of them has to be women. So women is the constant, and you pick two others. All right. I know if I was doing this, I'd probably be picking Indigenous people because, you know, my grandmother was an enrolled member of the Nabora, Nebraska Santee Sioux tribe. So I would be focusing on Indigenous people. That'll be at least one of them. And I'm intrigued by artists as well. And so women plus two other groups. This is because on the IB exam, women are almost always listed in the question. All right. You have a lot of resources there, and these are good resources, and you're going to want to use them. Okay. Required information for this. You know, what part of the nation would we find the largest population of this group? Again, here, you know, women, you're going to find women all over the United States. So this might speak more specifically to some groups more than others. All right. So make it applicable here. When you're answering these questions. How is this group impacted by where they live? Okay, so you might have to think back to your geography days, and maybe somehow that impacts them. I know probably Mr. Sheridan, Mr. Arnebeck, or Mr. Starr talked about where you live, and the geography of that, how it impacts your livelihood. Which New Deal programs were designed specifically to provide relief assistance for the group? All right, so find a few of them. You're not going to find all of them. So in my head, if you can always find 2 to 3 groups, that's fantastic. All right. What other assistance was available for this group? Okay, and so that other assistance may not necessarily come from the government, but could come from within their community, come within their network. One thing this group did to ensure their own survival. All right, so they might be on their own. So what do? All right, they still might follow the self-help approach. And who were considered voice leaders of the group? All right, so see if you can find some big name individuals here that could be associated with that group. Okay, and some of them could cross multiple groups here. You know, especially if it's an African American woman, could cover multiple groups. All right, so also include it. So one thing here is you have the A and the B range here, and that depends on, therefore, how you organize it. But what we want to look at is the economic impact. We want to look at the political impact, and we want to look at the social impact here. So also include a section or slide segment that includes a summary to explain the following. because that's how we really want to see its impact. All right, the economic, the political, the social impact. You choose your project. You want to know how hard you really, 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 really want to work on it. It's worth 30 beautiful points. And so, it depends on really ultimately what kind of grade you want to focus on. And so this will be due Friday of this week, Friday the 19th. So you might want to make a note of that somewhere so you can gauge your ability, your time management. And if you're working with someone, spend a couple days on R&D research, and then a couple days on developing it. Okay, it's due Friday, not when you walk into the class, but at 11:59. Okay, so that means I'll take a little bit of each day, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, coach a little bit on the front end of it, and I will spotlight a group and maybe spark some interest that way in that group, especially if you pick that group. Maybe in that clip it highlights or what I'm going to focus on. Might be something you add to your finished product. Okay, so we have that piece there. Questions on this? Yes. Like anytime you work with someone, you want to make sure, like on a Google slide or something, everyone's name appears there. So whatever it is, so if you are working with someone, you want to make sure that I'm aware of who you're working with. So whether that's put in on the finished product or put in to send me a little post in Schoology that's saying, hey, I worked with Susie Generic, Joe Quincy Public, whoever it might be. All right. Any other questions? All right. Okay. All right. If there are no questions, I'll let you work on this. All right. And so for those that are at home, you can exit the stage or stay on.